All right, it's about the time for us to get started. So first of all, thank you so much for everybody for coming over here at 5 p.m. And it's just gonna be a short course, and so don't worry about your food and dinner. You got time for that. Uh, so let's get started. Uh, Again, first of all, let's look at the topic of this short course. How far on average do power wheelchairs travel? It seems to be a simple number in your mind. But as you can imagine, this simple number involves so many factors. For example, where do those users live, their environment, and what's their routine? Do they go to work? Do they go to school? I mean, so many factors involved in this simple number. But anyway, we're gonna get into this. So oh, I forgot to introduce myself. Anyway, my name is Hanju, and I'm a current PhD student from Pitt in rehab science. And this project is part of our larger project and funded by Nightler. And we cooperated with the power wheelchair manufacturer, Promobile. We got a data set from them. So about this session objectives, after this session, you're gonna list which region had the highest mean daily distance traveled for mobile power wheelchair users in each year, because we have 2 years data sets. And then you're going to list the most predominant power wheelchair model in each region for each year. And then at the end, you're able to list the mean daily distance traveled for the users in the US area for each year. So in terms of data logging technologies, it's been implemented on wheelchairs for a long time. As you can see from those pictures from previous studies, starting from 2002 and all the way in the lower right corner to 2012. These are data loggers mounted on manual wheelchairs to record different metrics of the manual wheelchairs. And then here's the slide for previous research, like the first column from the top to the bottom, 2002 to 2017. And these research, they did study on either manual or power wheelchairs. And they had a sample size relatively small, actually, from 17 participants to like 132. And they had a relatively short study period from 5 days and most to 201 days. So the results about the mean daily distance traveled from their studies varied a little bit. I mean, the rough range was from 1,500 meters to 2,000 meters, excluding some outsiders. And then we cooperated with Promobile. They equipped their devices with connectivity feature, and the sensors on the device collect data such as distance traveled, battery charging, and the use of the power seating functions. And then those data were transferred to the cloud servers and managed by their fleet management platform. The user is able to download a smartphone app called My Promobile and then gave their consent to use that feature. Those data was collected then to the cloud, managed by the platform. So we got the data set from the platform later. Basically, 2 whole year data sets from 2022 and 2023, respectively. Those data set have some variables right there: market, model, mean daily distance, number of use days. We're gonna look into each of them one by one. So starting off from market, in 2022, we have these many countries, from Australia to Sweden and the United States of America. And then 2023, we have two more areas: Faroe Islands and Puerto Rico. So basically, we categorize them into 4 regions: Australia, Canada, Europe, and the US. As far as the model, there are 5 models in the dataset, from F3, F5, F5VS to M3 and M5. And then we just talked about the sample size. In 2022, we had 7,791 activated wheelchairs, power wheelchairs. And then we excluded some chairs, say some demo chairs, and some devices that did not send any data to the cloud. After all, we had a final sample size of 6,903 in 2022. And then in 2023, the final sample size is 8,954. And then moving on, what's those devices distribution in each region? Again, you just look at the table, and in 2022, the US took the majority of the share, around 71%. It's almost the same for 2023, a little bit up. And Australia, around 6%, Canada, 4%, and Europe, 18%. And then what about its model distribution? In 2022, as you may see from the table, again, M3 Corpus took the majority, not literally, almost the half of the share, around 43%. And in 2023, M3 took around 45%. For M3, in both years, it's around 26%. And M5, 6%. And M5 VS, it's around 18%. And M5, it's around 6%. It's getting a little bit more complicated as we look into the model's distribution across regions for both years. So, yeah, let's just get started. The top of this table in 2022, if you look at those numbers highlighted for M3, in Australia, we just look at those rows one by one. In Australia, M3 comprised almost 45%. And then in Canada, M3, 44%. But it's not the case in Europe. But still almost like the similar situation in the US, like 48% in 2022. The dominant model in Europe in 2022 was the F5VS, which comprised like 33% of that market. It's almost the same situation in 2023. So we just take a few seconds to look at this table, almost the same number. And then we move on. We came up with a definition: inactive users, meaning those devices used by these inactive users, they did not send any data for 6 or more days in a row at the beginning and or any other time period during 2022 or 2023, like 2 years respectively. And then look at the sample size of those inactive users. In 2022, we have 2,682 inactive users. In 2023, we have 3,790 inactive users. And then breaking them down into different regions with respect to their percentage, in 2022, Europe had like 43% of inactive users. And it has the most higher percentage of inactive users. And in 2023, Canada somehow had the highest percentage of inactive users. And then further statistical analysis showed these 4 areas did have a statistical different inactiveness levels. But somehow, say in 2022 and 2023, the comparison between Canada and Europe, they are they're totally opposite. Need some further explanation into why their respective inactiveness level changed. Then we move on to the mean daily distance traveled and the number of use days. So we define the number of use days as days when users drove more than 5 meters. Regardless, from this table, it's about regardless their region or wheelchair model, we got 1,519 meters for Permobil power wheelchair users in 2022. And they used their device on average 298 days. And then 2023, almost the same. Again, breaking into different areas. Still those two metrics, mean daily distance traveled and the number of use days. As you may see from this table, the EU had a significantly higher mean daily distance traveled than other regions in 2022. But it had only a significantly higher mean daily distance traveled than Australia and the United States, but not Canada in 2023. And then in terms of number of use days, the Australia area had significantly more use days than the Canada area in 2023. Again, it's opposite in 2022. But for both years, the US area had significantly more use days than the EU area. And then looking at those two metrics again across different models. Basically, the conclusion is in both years, the F5 model had a significantly higher mean daily distance traveled than other models except for M5. Yeah, it's just so many numbers. I know it's boring. It's quite obvious, actually, the conclusion. But anyway, we just don't look at those tables and numbers again. They're just gonna take a lot, of your memory to to do that. We just go through this conclusion slide one by one. So the M3 corpus model was dominant in those three areas, except for Europe. They have basically better model in that area. And for Permobil power wheelchair users, in those four regions, they did have statistically different inactiveness levels. It involves, again, a lot of factors. Environment, regulation, healthcare, so many. And those two metrics, basically for this session, the mean daily distance traveled and the number of use days, regardless of regions and the models, they kept almost the same for those 2 years. Later on, we're gonna analyze some previous years data sets from 2018, 2019, even 2020 to look at the influence of COVID specifically. Does that influence those two metrics? And then those two metrics remain almost the same, again, across 4 regions and 5 models. This means basically we can use those two metrics in the future as a reference to help us with, with coming up with some interventions for power wheelchairs or even some health policies. And then EU had a significantly higher mean daily distance traveled than any other regions in 2022, but only higher than, significantly again, than Australia and the US, but not Canada in 2023. In both years, F5 had a significantly higher mean daily distance traveled than any other models except for M5, as actually those two share pretty similar configurations, except that they're middle wheel and the front wheel. Another contrary situation for their use of for the use days, the EU had significantly more use days than Canada in 2023, but lower or less use days than the Canada in 2022. In both years, US has significantly more use days than the EU. So I know this session is a little bit boring, so many numbers, and basically conclusion sentence for you to remember. Again, the session objectives. That's basically all. Time for, I think I saved you a lot of time for questions. Thank you so much. Anybody for questions? Thank you so much.
Also, the seating information was also recorded. To what extent, maybe how much they used the tilt or recline feature during that time period?
How much time, how many times they use a specific power seating function uh, in one day, but we did not have that data in the data set.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the concerns I would have is that information being confidential, because you can see where insurance companies could potentially
They were
go
not
to say,
sharing that with us.
okay.
Yeah.
And just letting you, the concerns with AI and coming up and a lot of information sharing is Mrs. Smith only used her power tilt, 2 days this week and didn't get beyond 20 degrees during those sessions. That's a concern I would have as a provider and just for patient care down the road.
It's certainly a issue of confidentiality, but we were told by the company Promobel they have the capability to record that data, but we didn't see that in our data set. Our data set is pretty limited. It's totally de-identified, and we had only like daily distance and a number of use days. That's it. So I was limited by their variables. Anyone else?
So
Please.
what's the intent of this data?
Oh, that's actually we're gonna have a long journey. It's just the very first piece of this puzzle. We're gonna figure out the mean daily distance traveled for those, say, different regions, different models, and then moving on, we're looking into, say, a specific part of a power wheelchair. For example, caster. We're gonna figure out what's the average, repair time for that part, like from delivery to the first time repair. How about those two numbers, as you can imagine, multiply them together? What you're gonna get? Every, the average use and the average repair time for that specific part. If you multiply those two numbers together, you're gonna get a guess or pretty good indicator for that specific part to get maintained, not repair. I try to distinguish those two words, from right now, because we always, papers put maintenance and repair together. They're totally different. So my study in the future will focus on preventative, maintenance. We try to do some proactive things, not reactive anymore. So it's just right now it sounds like a dream, but I know we don't get reimbursed for maintenance, and then even in the more future, we can say we do some clinical trials to say we're going to save the health insurance some money, do some cost analysis because we do some preventative analysis, preventative maintenance on that part. We maintained that chair in a functional status for a longer period of time. So that's another way to save money for the health insurance companies. And then probably we're going to get this maintenance thing into the policy. So it's a long journey. It's just the very beginning of it. Thank you. Hopefully I answer your question. Thank you. Thank you.
understanding that? Thank you. Very fast. Am I right in understanding that in the EU, in Europe, they had more distance traveled than in the US?
They have better models and longer longer daily distance traveled. Yes, you're
And
correct.
also more use days? Or
Not
is that
necessarily.
not necessarily, but the distance traveled? So if we look at the US in-home use policy and think about the models that might be available or might not be available, you think that probably had something to do with a different payer model in Europe versus in the US? That,
It's getting more complicated.
yeah, or Europeans drive farther
We are looking
because,
different countries,
yeah, yeah.
different
Oh, true.
healthcare
Yeah,
systems. That's a lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yes, that's a potential topic.
It's more sort of observation than a question, or just wondering if it's a consideration. So in Europe is has many countries,
Yes,
and we're one. But they have several more concentrated areas that are more, and I'm using the word pedestrian friendly, recognizing this is not for pedestrian use. But when you look at the environment that is more so not automobile or bus or mass transit related distance used use to get to resources, community resources, markets, um, community things, I think that that could be a contributing factor to the distance traveled being a higher number in that um, measurement compared to U.S. I don't know if that's something you give consideration to or not.
it is. It is one of the considerations, definitely. But like I said, we're in a really, really, uh, you know, at the beginning of this long journey, I believe. Different countries, different healthcare systems, and so many factors. Weather, traffic, transportation. So right now, we just try to mimic our automobile industry, focusing probably in the US area, uh, in the States, and come up with that simple number. Like for your cars, after you get your car, after you know, you drive to up to a certain, mileage, it is a time for you to, leave your car at the dealer to get it maintained or a certain amount of, use days. So it is just the beginning. Thank you so much for the question. I know it's a good question, but it's kind of like the future, a bigger picture, way bigger picture for me.
All right, so I remember when this was rolled out by Permobil several years ago.
Yes.
Did you guys take into account, did they supply any data to you on the charging cycles of the batteries, like how often they were charging them in order to get that feedback?
I think it's the same answer. We were told by the company they recorded the battery charging situation or probably the cycles, but we were not shared by them about that data.
And they didn't take into account any of the time where there might have been downtime on the unit for not being usable, like it was in need of repair?
We did not have that data.
None of that data.
Yeah, that's the answer. Thank you.
Right.
Is 5:30 yet? The time is up. Oh.
It also occurred to me that the model that the Europeans were using was the F5VS, which has bigger motors and bigger batteries necessarily than the F3. So did they go further because they were able to from a compliance or from an insurance standpoint, or because they had a chair because the F5VS made that possible? They had bigger motors and batteries. I don't know, to what extent do you think you'll be able to determine causality of some of the data that you have?
I think my own assumption is it is because it's a better model. It has better maneuverability, compared to M3. But the dominant model in the States, even for Canada and Australia, is M3. So the short answer is, I think it's because it's a better model, and it's certainly related to their healthcare system, and they got paid with better models. Yeah. Thank you. Good
Thank you.
question. Thank you. Anybody? So we are just at the beginning, like I said. Hopefully in the future ISS, I can bring you some progress. Our goal is just to get preventative maintenance a standard practice, and get suppliers, especially those technicians, reimbursed for their labor and the time and the travel. Again, it's not easy. Everybody knows that it's not easy to change the policy. Give us some time. Thank you so much. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.